from Ohio's Channel 4 News. Serving Ohio for more than a decade, this is Capitol Square from ONN.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Capitol Square. I'm Jim Heath. Chief Justice Thomas Moyer remains with us. And joining us from the Ohio League of Women Voters, President Meg Flack. Meg, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
From the State House Press Corps, we welcome our good friends Karen Kassler. She's State House Bureau Chief for Ohio Public Radio and Television. And from the Columbus Dispatch, reporter James Nash. James, Karen, good to see you guys.
Good morning.
Let's kind of pick up now and talk about this big movement to change the way we eventually place our justices and sort of the debate between the current system and getting rid of electing them. Chief Justice, your thoughts on that?
Well, Ohio is in the minority of states that still elects all of our judges, including the Supreme Court justices, in an open general elections like every other statewide candidate. The problem with that is that it takes too much money. One cannot be a serious contender today. Generally, belief is that unless you plan to raise $1 million, have a committee that raises $1 million for you, and that then creates a perception. All the surveys, national, state surveys, indicate that people believe, 75% of the people believe that the contributions to judges' campaigns has some influence on the decisions the judge makes. Well, that's in direct conflict with the premise of our system, that fairness, impartiality, independence from outside influences. So we desperately need to change the system in Ohio. We really should do what many other states have figured out well before us, long before us.
I guess there's probably a perception, too, that people that can afford $1 million are sitting there judging folks who probably have a lot less income and have a whole different life situation. I mean, the counter-argument to this always, though, is you're taking the rights of people to decide who their elected representatives are. In this case, they're judges. I mean, how do you get past that basic argument that seems to always stick?
Well, as you know, the League of Women Voters is a voters' rights organization, good government, nonpartisan, and we have supported the appointment elective system for Supreme Court justices for over almost 40 years. We believe it's the best way to ensure impartial and fair judiciary, get the corrosive influence of money out of it. And rather than take away the vote, what the system really will do is ensure that voters have a lot more information. We advocate that a judicial performance evaluation be used as part of the system, which is widespread in systems across the United States. And this is like a 360 report card where a justice, the peers on the court, people who come before him, the litigants, all have an opportunity to review and report on their interactions with the justice. Then this is published prior to the retention election, so people really have an opportunity to make an educated decision, and they don't have to turn to their lawyer friends, as most of us do now, and say, who should we vote for?
Right.
I'm wondering, though, you're talking about a system where perhaps the governor and a panel would appoint these judges. How do you find the people who would be appointed and make sure that these people aren't politically connected? They're not big donors. I mean, if these people rise to the point where they are noticeable to be appointed by the governor and a panel, wouldn't they be connected?
Well, go ahead.
We can look around the country and see how other states have figured out that very question. And Arizona is probably one of the best examples. When Senator Day O'Connor was in Arizona, they adopted a system for appointment and retention election. And what they do there is actually have the members of the nominating commission. It's a very diverse group, a majority of which are not lawyers. Most of them, in fact, a large majority are non-lawyers. And they're actually confirmed by their Senate. Now that's unusual. Most states don't do that. But there are requirements for membership on the panel that virtually guarantee that it's going to be a very diverse panel, and that isn't just one thing. It is not just a bunch of lawyers, as people say. Well, I don't want a bunch of lawyers sitting in a room someplace deciding who's going to be on the Supreme Court. That's not what we're talking about at all. And most states don't do it that way. And so we need to shoot down some of these perceptions that are not accurate. But the key to it, you've raised the most important question, is who creates who is on the nominating panel commission, and who appoints them. And that's the key. That's the one question that most frequently is asked. Well, who's going to decide the three names that from which the governor chooses? And so we have, let's say, we have some good examples around the country on how to do that, to make sure that that panel is diverse.
And if I could add, another key characteristic of this system is the transparency. There's opportunity for public input. The entire application process is open. The entire interview process is typically open. Even in some systems, some states, the deliberative process is open, so that the public has, again, more information about who becomes justice on the Supreme Court.
This was on the ballot when Chief Justice Moyer was just a brand new Chief Justice, and it was defeated by a wide margin. I think that was 87.
Yeah.
It was also on the ballot much earlier this century, or last century actually, and was defeated by a similarly wide margin. You're likely to see support from editorial boards, from the governor's already on board, the Speaker of the House is on board. How do you counter the perception that this is just sort of an elite cabal of newspaper editorialists and politicians who are telling the public, this is what's best for you, eat your Brussels sprouts, we're going to take away your right to vote on who the justices are? How do you convince people that this is in their best interest?
I think one way you convince them is that if you ask people, would you like to vote for, would you rather vote for your judges or Supreme Court justices or have them appointed by someone, they will say, oh, well, we want to vote for them. And then when you tell them, give them some information about how much money is contributed to the campaigns and the large sources of those funds, the entities that provide much of the sources, they will flip the other way. There's an interesting survey in Washington, state of Washington, that does exactly that. People go 180 degrees and say, well, I'd rather have them appointed, because they realize that they don't want, most people don't like the thought that money, contributions from an entity or a person might affect the decision of a court. And so that's one argument that we make, James. It's difficult, though, because many people think, oh, I want the chance to get rid of a bad judge. Well, you'll still have a chance to do that under the system that we are trying to develop with the help of many other folks.
And Mick, let me just ask you, is there maybe there is a middle ground here? Is it public financing? What if you level the playing field and have all judicial candidates spend the same amount in their campaigns?
Well, I'm going to leave that criteria up to Chief Justice Moyer to talk about, but we did examine publicly funding campaigns at the Judicial Forum in November, and two problems. One, it's so expensive in Ohio. North Carolina uses that system, but they have a fraction of the campaign costs. Secondly, it doesn't get the third-party interests, the special interests out of campaigns, and that could be a real problem in Ohio. The appointive elective system really minimizes the ability of third parties to influence the judiciary, because it's a process where it's a very diverse commission. They don't get to choose who becomes justice.
Kind of picking up on what Jim had said here, this did come up on the ballot back in the 80s, and we've seen other reform methods and ideas come up that have been rejected by voters. And so I'm wondering, do voters really want this? Are they satisfied with the system now, and how do you change that and tell them that this is a better idea than the one that's out right now?
Chief Justice, sorry,
go ahead.
I want to dominate. A lot has happened since 1987. You're correct, James, that in 1987, almost 2-1, it was defeated. A lot has changed. There's a lot more money now in the system. And we've had the West Virginia case in which $3 million is contributed to an independent campaign in support of Chief Justice who voted on a case. And that has raised people's focus on or attention to the whole phenomenon of fundraising and the influence it has on campaigns.
Do you think that's easy enough for people to understand? Because typically people, when they don't understand an issue, they vote no. Do you think that issue's easy enough for people to understand?
I think we have a huge education campaign. It's an uphill, it's a high hill to climb. But as I say, so many other states have done it, that we think it's possible to do in Ohio, but it will not be easy. It will not be easy, because you have to be able to get people's attention and have them think about, what do I want my Supreme Court to be? Do I, I want them to be fair and impartial and all that, but aren't they now? And I would say yes, but the perception is, when you start talking about the money, so much in our society is controlled by money. I mean, let's face it, it's controlled by money. So it's counterintuitive to tell people, well, you can contribute, you can have this interest or that interest contribute in the aggregate hundreds of thousands of dollars to candidates, and then say, oh, but we never pay any attention to those contributions. People don't believe that.
Right.
They don't believe it, and that's the problem. It's the perception.
Chief Justice Thomas Moyer, good to see you. Thank you
Nice to
so
see you,
much.
Jim.
Meg
Thank you.
Black from the League of Women Voters, good to
Thank
see
you.
you. All right, our panelists will stay here. We got some political issues you guys might be interested in to pick up when we come back right here on Capitol Square.